Everybody, how are you today? Thank you for joining me for our video on how to make clay turtles. So I have a few examples here and just wanted to show these off so you can see where we are going. So I've got a few different sizes here, and sometimes that's just determined by how the artist makes them. So here's my little tray of turtles. My daughter made this one, then I made these other two. And as you can see, they're all just a little bit different. And so today we're gonna start off by making the shell, then we'll make the feet, the head. They all have a little tail. So everybody can grab their clay, and it should look about like this. So this is actually, if you got the project box, this is half of the clay that would have been in the project box. So you can do 2 turtles from the amount of clay that was included in your box. So you would just twist it apart. So watch this, and you can probably use some adult help with this. If you want to break your clay, you can just twist it in half. And so that's how you would start to get your clay that's about the size that mine is. And this is about 3/4 of a pound. So you started with 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds, and you'll break it down to this size. And so then once you get it down to your a little bit under 1 pound, this size of clay, I'm gonna have you break it again, kind of like I did. And you wanna have a lump that's bigger and a lump that's smaller. And mine is a little bit, I've probably got a little too much on this side. So I'm gonna pinch some off and put it back in. And so this is gonna be what I save for the head and the feet and the tail. And I want to have just a little bit extra just in case, and I'm going to set that aside. And then the shell clay will be just a little bit bigger. I'll show you that one more time. Just a little bit bigger. Then I'll just pat it back and forth in my hands to make a ball. And so this is my kids' project. I did it with my kids, and they needed help with this part. So mine are 4 and 6. And that's okay. This can be a joint effort if you have little hands. But it's always good to try it and see how it works on your own. And I'm just patting it back and forth between the palms of my hands. It's touching the bottoms of my fingers as well, but mostly the palm of my hand is shaping this into a nice ball. And so what we are making today is a pinch pot, and I'm going to show you a couple things that I have to help you get started. So I have a little bit of water. I warm mine up because it's a little bit cold today. I don't know if you can see outside or hear on the roof above me, but it's raining, so it's just a little bit cold today. I have a little towel to wipe my hands on. And then, you may or may not have something like this at home. This is half of an ornament, and I like to use this sometimes to put underneath the turtle, just so I don't smush him when I'm making his head and his feet. So, you would want something to go in between the turtle and the form, if you have something like this. So it could be half of an Easter egg. Sometimes we get the little LOL dolls that come in something like this. So if it's the right size, it can work. But if not, you don't have to have it. It's just an idea of something you might have around the house. And then I have a pen here. And so this is going to be used for some texture on the shell. You can also use a chopstick. And then one more thing is a plastic fork. If you have a plastic fork, that's helpful as well. But if not, we can make all this work. But if you have a moment, you can pause the video and then go get these things that I mentioned. So your water, your towel, your pen or a chopstick. If you have an ornament, a half of an ornament to put under the shelf, and a plastic fork. Oh, and did I say paintbrush? Paintbrush is nice to have too. So just some things that you might have around your house to make your project unique. But there's always ways to work around it. So when you're ready, you can pick up your clay for the shell. Make sure that you didn't get your head clay. I still have the head and feet and tail clay over here. And then I'm just gonna take my thumb and I'm gonna go in. I'm not gonna go in on the side. I'm gonna go in the middle. I'm just gonna work my thumb in there. And this clay is a lot harder than like Play-Doh or dough that you would make for bread. So just take your time. You don't wanna push your thumb all the way through. So you're only going about 3/4 of the way. So that would mean between your thumb and the outside, you've got about this much clay left. That would be about an inch of clay. And from there, once you have your little hole like this, and if it's off center a little bit, that's okay too. Then I'm gonna start doing my pinching. So I'm going to take my fingers like this, and I'll put them inside the ball of clay, and I'm gonna turn and I'm going to pinch. And so what this does, this is really cool, is it makes it bigger. So every time I pinch the clay, it's getting thinner, and it's gonna grow to be more the size of the turtle. And so I like to tell my students in class, and it's kind of different to teach class on here because I can't see you and I can't see what you're doing. But I like to say, watch first, watch how I do it, and then you do it, because you can't do it while you watch. You have to look at your clay while you do it. So you can watch, and then you can pause the video and catch up, and then do the next step with me. So that's the really cool thing about doing this online, is you can pause it and just go at your own speed. Or if I go too slow, you can speed me up. But I do encourage you to take your time, because clay is not something that likes to be rushed. It is a very slow moving material, and the slower you take it, the more you'll pay attention to details and probably have less cracks. So you can see my hole's getting a little bit bigger. The rim is still fairly thick, and it's getting a little bit taller, so it still doesn't look quite like a turtle, but they can all look a little bit different too. So I'm going to continue to work on this, and I'm paying attention to the wall thickness, and this is something that I really, really want both parents and kids to pay attention to, is not letting your walls be too thick. So your wall is just how thick the clay is. So this is the wall. Same thing for the bottom. The bottom also, you need to pay attention to the thickness. So about the width of an adult's thumb. So a 1/2 inch is about what you want, or a little bit thinner, but not too much thinner. But your thumb is a really good gauge. And you can watch as I go to see what mine, about how thin mine gets. But if they are left too thick, they can explode in the kiln. So you really don't want to have anything thicker than your thumb, your adult's thumb. So usually, like if your hands get tired, you can set it down on the table and you can work like this. And just check the bottom and make sure that there's not a lot of clay left behind there. The good thing is, when you find a thick spot, if you squeeze it, it's going to make your piece bigger. And that's always exciting to see your piece grow. So if you start to get little cracks on the edge here, that's okay. That's what our water's for. We're not going to drench it. We don't want the whole piece to be wet. But you can take one finger, dip it in your water bucket, and then rehydrate. So hydrate just means to wet it, to give it a little bit more moisture. You can rehydrate the clay, and that's gonna help with the cracking. And then I'm gonna go back to my pinching. And I'm gonna think about what I want my turtle shell to look like. So yours can be wide or it can be tall. Turtles come in all different shapes and sizes. But you could see on the ones that I made the rim flare out a little bit. Let's take another look at that. I'm trying to be really careful with these because they get so brittle before they're fired. So you can see the shell. So it was, you know, like this. I pinched it out. So I'm going to show you how I do that now. Okay, so I'll turn it upside down, set it on the table, and I'm just going to gently pinch it outwards. And this just happens a little bit at once. So my thumb's on the inside, and I'm just leaning the clay out a little bit at a time. And this will give it that cool turtle shell shape. And then it also makes it a little bit easier for us to attach the head. Now, one thing before I go any further, you want to be really careful that you don't get the rim too thin because then it can crack. So you'll notice I'm really careful as I go to keep that wall thickness fairly even. And I'm really careful to keep things smooth because once they go in the kiln, these turn hard. So this is called stoneware clay. So it turns into a stone in the kiln. And if there's any sharp spots left on here, they can cut you or scratch the table, and you don't want that. So I've got a few more little bitty cracks in the rim, and I'm gonna add one more finger's worth of water here. So I'm just gonna rub that. And then it may not all go away right away, but just giving it some water and letting it soak in will help it stretch more. If you have cracks, it's probably just getting a little too thin and you don't have to stretch that area anymore, or you can always grab a little bit of your extra clay. Just a little tiny bit goes a long way, and smooth it on top of that crack to reinforce it, and then it will strengthen and fill in the gaps, because when it's cracking it probably just means it's either too dry or too thin. So you can add clay and add water to fix that. You don't have to go as fast as I go. Just pause and take your time to make your turtle look like what you want it to look like. And it doesn't have to look like mine. It needs to look like yours. So I love when I have a class, I teach the same lesson and everybody's looks different, and that's what is interesting to me about art. So if you have something to put underneath your turtle, this might be a good time to do it, just to keep it from collapsing. Mine doesn't really quite fit, so that's always something that you might run into. So I'm just gonna put that aside for now. I may come back to it. But at this point, my daughters asked, how do you make it smooth? So I'm just gonna set it, and really, I'm gonna set it on the table, you know, like it's right side up if it's a turtle, and I'm just gonna smooth it. Now, if I smooth it hard, it will collapse. So I'm smoothing really, really gently. Really, really gently. And I can also pick it up and put my fingers inside and smooth. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that was one thing that my kids specifically asked me is, how do you make it look smoother, Mom? And so that's what I do. I just run my fingers over it. That sort of works out the fingerprints, but the cool thing is we're gonna add some texture anyway. So that's gonna be the next step. I think I'm just gonna pinch out my rim just a little bit more. I did get some water on my hands to help with this part. I think that's looking turtley to me. I'm liking this. Okay, So this is where you can get your pen or your chopstick, and I'm gonna use the chopstick because it's just a little bit of a softer tip. You can also use the end of your paintbrush. It just depends what you have, and we just work with what we have. That's the cool thing about art, is we can get creative and use what we have. So I'm just gonna start, and you might wanna look at pictures online of what turtle shells look like. Let's see if I can add a little bit better. And I'm just gonna start to make the little shapes that we see on turtles' backs. And I'm not going very far into the clay with this chopstick. I'm just brushing the surface with it. To get that cool look. And you can, if you're like, oh, that one looks a little too big, then you can, you know, come in there and change the shape so that you are happy with it, because it's your turtle. It doesn't have to look like my turtle, it has to look like your turtle. And I'm just gonna go all the way around with that. If you have some stamps at home, you could get them. We used a shell, but it really smushed our turtle, and you couldn't really get much texture out of the shell. So what we did that worked well for us is a lot of times the backs of pens will have something that will make a cool texture. So you can make some little dots with the back of your pen, just to give him some like spots on his shell. Don't push through your clay. You don't want to do that. If you do get some of that extra clay, fill it back in. So those are like little freckles for him. This is where you can really get creative and let your artistic side come through. You don't want to try to do dots with anything sharp, because it is gonna go through. I could do small dots with this side, but the glaze most likely will fill those small dots in, so something bigger will make more of an impact. Okay, so you can keep working on that. I'm gonna move on. I can come back and do some more decorations, but you have fun with that part. That's one of my favorite parts. And I'm gonna show you how to make the head. So we'll see if this little will fit up in here. Does a little bit. Okay. There. And then here's my extra clay. So I've got to make 4 feet, 1 head, and 1 tail. So I'm going to pinch it in half. I'm going to use half, the bigger half for my head and neck, and then the other half will be for my feet. So again, for the head, slide that over there so don't bump him. I'm going to roll it in my hands. So I like to have a round head, and then I'm going to pull out a neck. Okay, so there's the head. You don't want the head to be too big because heads can explode. So be careful about that. From here, I'm going to pull the neck out. Your head can be just a little bit thicker than your adult's thumb, but not much. Don't want anybody to explode. All right, I'm not gonna do his eyes and his mouth yet because I've still got to attach it, and I don't want it to look like I smushed it, trying to attach it on. So that's gonna be the head. I'll put that down. And then I'm gonna make 4 feet. And don't forget the tail. So for the feet, I make a little ball. And then I'm gonna make it a little bit longer because we have to have space for these feet to attach underneath. You're gonna have some clay to attach to or they'll fall off. This is really important. You don't want the feet to fall off. So this is going to be my foot. We'll add some toes when we put it on. This is where it's going to attach. This is the part that will stick out. I kind of flared out a little bit so it looks like they can paddle like a flipper. And so I've got 4 of those. And then the tail, I'll make 4 of those. But the tail, don't do a long tail because it'll break off. Really have more than enough clay here. If you have too much clay, just pinch it off. You can figure out something else to do with it. But a long tail will just make it really fragile because thin, long pieces, they're really easy to break off. So, especially since these have to ride in the car before they're fired, we're trying to be really careful with them. So, there's a good little pointy tail. I'm gonna put that beside the head. There's the head that y'all can see. There's my shell. There's my head. There's a tail. There's foot number 1. And the next part's when we're going to use that plastic fork that you have. But I've got some other ideas too. I could sit here all day and smooth these little feet. It's another little foot. That's extra. So I want you to leave questions in the comments, either on YouTube or on Facebook, so that I can help and answer them. I love helping with questions, and I love seeing your pictures of the things that you make, so I definitely want to see that. And just remember that I want it to look like yours. It doesn't have to look like mine. Be careful with the smoothing. Make sure everything looks nice and smooth so that you don't have any sharp points on there. Okay, so there's 4 little feet, a tail, and a head. So here we go. We are going to talk about scoring and slipping now. So your little, whatever you have underneath, if you have anything, it might get in your way, but it might be helpful, but I'm going to get rid of mine. Okay, so I'm going to rinse off my fingers a little bit. And especially if you are younger and you have little hands, this is a good part to have an adult help you, because we're going to be putting on feet that might want to fall off. I hope not. You're also welcome to wait to let this dry for a little bit. I would keep the other things covered up. So if you have like a trash bag or a Walmart bag to cover them up, then you can. But if you wanted to let this dry for an hour and come back and add the feet, you could do that too. It really depends on how much water you used and how much airflow you have. But I'm just going to go ahead and put some feet on right now. So what we're going to do, you're going to take your little fork. So I'll just use my pen here. And you're going to scratch the surface. So you'll do this with your fork. You don't have to scratch a big area. Mine's little. And I'm going to do that in the 4 places for the feet. You can also put your initials on here, but not yet, unless you want to do it in the bottom. I'll put mine in here. Put L-I in the bottom. Then I'm going to scratch here. Then I'm going to scratch here. And you see, like, I've got a finger underneath where I'm scratching, so that I'm supporting the clay. And then I'm going to use this little paintbrush. If you don't have a paintbrush, just use your finger. And I'm just going to put a little bit of water on here to make it sticky. Then I'm going to take one of my feet and I'm going to scratch it too. I'm scratching the part that you want to attach. So some people call this scratch and attach. I'll put just a little bit of water on there too. And what this does is it just makes the surface sticky. It builds up sort of like a glue on there. I'm not scoring so hard that it's going through. It's just surface. Then I'm going to support underneath here and then push down on the foot. Make sure your flipper side is out and not being attached. And I'm just doing gentle pressure. I am doing pressure, but it's gentle pressure to stick that on there. And I'm going to hold this up so you can see. You don't have to hold yours up. Okay? So I really did smush that on there. And then I'm going to do that with all of my little feet. I'm going to scratch here, add a little water. Ooh, a little too much. I'm going to scratch again. And kids, if you have ideas of things that you might like to make in the future, either in like a kids camp or an online pottery class like this one while we're staying home, you can leave me those ideas in the comments. I always like to get new ideas of things that you would like to make. I can't do them all, but it's nice to have lots of ideas to pick from. And I appreciate it because I haven't been a kid in a long time, so it's nice to be reminded what you want. And we're not exactly alike, of course, so it's good for me to hear from other people. So here comes foot number 3. This is coming together pretty good. If yours doesn't like to be set on the table, you can have an adult hold it like this, or a big sister or grandparent, big brother, all that good stuff. So there's foot 4. So I know everybody is out of school right now and doing a lot of hanging out at the house. So I would love to hear in the comments what your favorite thing about being home is. Mine is that I've been able to cook some really good food that I didn't have time to cook while my kids were in school. So we've been eating really good food. I made chocolate chip cookies, and I made grits casserole, and I made homemade bread, and I've made homemade pizza. It's all been really good. Okay, so I got 4 feet on there, so now we have a tail and a head to do. I'm going to do the tail. So I'm going to put the tail back here, doing my scoring, my scratching, add a little bit of water, then add a little water on the tail. Remember, not long tails and not super thin tails. And add a little pressure. Get him on there. Okay. One little tool so y'all can see this better. So now, ooh, well, I got it upside down. I got a score for the head, but I'm going to put the head on while it's right side up because he needs a little extra support. So I'm going to put him like this. Woo, doesn't he look like a turtle with no head? Isn't that cute? Okay. So then, my turtle head. Score his neck. add the water, score it just a little bit more. And then I'm gonna put it under. Make sure that you're attaching it to where you put your scoring. The peak, yep, that's pretty good. Lift it up just a little bit. Give it my pressure. I'm not pressing so hard that I'm gonna make a thin spot. Just pressing hard enough to get it to join. And then I'm gonna set him back down. And look at that. Turtle guy. He's like almost ready, but he doesn't have any eyes. So he can't see. There's my little stopper. And he needs some toes. That's what I think. So here we go. This is where the pen comes in handy again. Don't forget to do your initials. Okay, so turtles have their eyes on the sides of their head rather than the front, but you can put them wherever you want. But I'm gonna do it right here. You can see, like, I went kind of deep with that because the glaze is gonna fill in some of it. So if you just do really light little eyes, they may not show up because of the glaze. So there's the eyes. And then I'm gonna do him a little happy face. Let's see if we can see. You can do your happy face after he dries a little bit too, but that's on there. And then a lot of them do just have 2 little holes for their nose. So there's a little nose. And then for his toes, let's see. I'll just separate them with my pen really, really lightly. I'm not trying to cut through the clay. Really lightly. The little toes. So there's my little turtle. Oh, and tell me what you want to name your turtle. We named one like Shelly, and we named one Sea Salt. So see what you can come up with and have fun with it. So I'm excited to see what you make. Have a great rainy day if it's raining where you are, and I'll see you soon. Bye.